So I'll tell you about CASCADEUR, and it's our own Banzai Games physics-based animation software. But before we get and dive into the program, let me just tell you a couple of words about myself. So I actually come from a math applied background. I studied applied math in university. So I was doing some physical modeling of quantum equations, which is, in my opinion, more complicated than what I do now. But actually, when I was a PhD student in Russia, you just don't have as a PhD student, you don't get enough money for living. So I was thinking to get a job. And as I loved games from the school days, I decided to try to get into a gaming company. And Banzai Games had an internship program. So I just hopped in and decided to try myself, and found pretty fast I found myself working on different algorithmic stuff in the games. But pretty fast I switched on to CASCADEUR, which had much more algorithms, physics in it, because actually the games, they were mobile games. They were not that hard, especially at that time. And it was like 6-7 years ago. So that's how I actually got into the development of this tool. And it was really great fun. So in this talk, I'll tell you what actually motivated Banzai Games in the first place to create its own animation software. It's not something everybody does. And I'll tell you the biggest challenges we faced while creating and adapting CASCADEUR physics tools to real-life usage and to game production. And actually, I'll show you how the story evolved from the start, showing you pictures, videos of the stuff we had almost 10 years ago. Well, not we, actually. I wasn't there yet at that time. So let's move on. First, how it all started. Actually, one of the founders of the company, more than 10 years ago, Evgeny Davin, his hobby was animation and he liked it a lot. And he took a standard 3D software and tried to find something like a center of mass, because he knew from physics, and he's actually from applied math background too. He knew from physics that center of mass should move along a ballistic curve while the character is in free flight. And the center of mass seemed like the essential thing, the most logical pivot point for rotation of the character. And what he found out that there's no such a thing in standard 3D software, and nobody actually speaks about the laws of physics. Nobody tries to make the animation realistic. And although animators do have some concepts of inertia, rotation, energy, and another things that if you dive deeper in, you understand that actually that comes from physics and from physics rules. But mainly animators are artists, and they concentrate a lot on the artistic side. And that's a good thing. But if you want to make a realistic animation, and nowadays realistic animation is more and more popular, and actually even in CG, it's used a lot in games. Games were CG originally; they were fully CG all the time, and there are more and more realistic games, and the graphics is evolving in games really fast. But creating a realistic animation is still very hard. And then in cinema, they have more and more CG also, because there are a lot of benefits if your movie is actually computer graphic generated. You have a lot of freedom to do. And actually, we see that even the brands that were initially cartoonish, they try to move towards the realistic side. Maybe not everything is ideal there. There are a lot of critics of the new Lion King, but still, people are watching it, and there's a lot of cool stuff in it. And we think that we actually can solve some of the problems, and especially those that are regarding the animation, the character action animation. And here's the problem here. You probably know about the uncanny valley effect. So when a character reaches some certain level of realism, the character starts to get scary. And if it's more cartoonish, then the brain doesn't think that it is fooled. But if it's close to realistic, but not realistic enough to fool the brain, then it gets scary, like somebody tries to make you believe, somebody tries to trick you. And if you pass that valley and you actually trick the brain, then it becomes okay, and the likability actually becomes good. So what we want to do is to push the character action animation to the right side of the valley. But is there any way to push it right now? Well, the main way you can do it is to use motion capture. And motion capture is a good thing especially it does require some cleaning, etc., but probably as people use more AI in this stuff, more deep learning algorithms, it will be better and better from the start. But still, you face a lot of problems if you're using motion capture. Because if you want to do a flip, well, you have to find somebody who is able to do this flip. And what if it's not a flip? What if you want kung fu moves like Jackie Chan does? You have to find Jackie Chan or somebody as skillful as Jackie Chan. And then what if you have a complicated action scene where people are riding on a bicycle or riding on something else? You have to create all the things. And that's still while we're talking about people's characters, humanoids. But what if it's a horse that you want an animation of? Well, then, of course, you can build a big studio, but it will be costly, and then find a costume for a horse and motion capture it. But what if it's a lion? It will be harder to do with a lion. What if it's a multi-legged monster or dragon? It's so the motion capture does have its limitations, and there are actually a lot of them. And so this is actually what we wanted to overcome. We wanted to give animators an ability to create animation like this one. It's on purpose something that will have a lot of problems to motion capture. You'll have to do all the scenery, etc. And indeed, this was not motion captured. It's part of CASCADEUR trailer, and it's fully hand animation. But from this point, let's go a bit back, like a lot back actually, and see how it started. Why did we start to do this, and show that actually we've been on a long way already, and we feel that there's a long way ahead of us. So this is the very first prototype. So you can see it's very basic. It's 2D. There's already some IK stuff in the controls. You actually had to do every frame yourself. There was no interpolation. And this was used to create animations for this game that was never published. It's just a prototype that Evgeny created at those old times. It was a hobby of his, and for a long time it just was put into the computer and nobody watched it. But at some point of the timeline, the company decided to move from the football managers they were doing those times to actually create a fighting game, and it was a social fighting game, social network game at that time. But it was planned to do real 3D animation for it, so the editor was rewritten from scratch, and now there was a real 3D world, and classical timeline appeared. There was interpolation, the outliner, and all the other stuff, minimal stuff you need to create animation software. The model actually was really simple. It consisted of point particles, and based on the physical skeleton, you could have IK and FK just by selecting all the objects down the hierarchy, and we actually still use that. There were no mesh, no bones, so it was an original idea, and the body consists of capsules. But there was stuff at that time that is actually not present right now in the program. For example, the real-time simulation. It's completely useless when you're actually creating animation, but it was very fun to demonstrate it for demonstrations and for playing around. So you can actually see how with the red squares, the parts of the body are pinned down, so the physics doesn't move them. And then when this pinning is removed, then the object fall. And then there was collision with the ground, so you could actually play with the cubes and characters. And you could forward simulate and bake down the simulation into the animation. And then you have an animation of how the cube flies. So that was fun, but that was not used for real animation production. One more thing we had back those days is the muscle simulation. So actually, this is how it worked. You could create the poses, and then you run the forward simulation, and from frame to frame, the muscles work in such a way to make the character move to the next pose. And it also performs the time step. And so if all the poses are correct, and the character will keep his balance because of these poses, then you will actually see how the fully realistic 100% physically based animation appears. But it was really hard to actually make all those poses. And if you change anything, then you'll have to do everything from the start. The character will fall. You have to find a way to keep his balance. So when we actually did animations for the games, this all was not used, and it was just creating animations, looking at the particle points and using the IK. Then the other thing we used muscles for is to calculate which parts of the character body were actually active during the animation. So you can see it here, how it looks like. It looks nice, but while you can look at it, sometimes you can see some mistakes in that, but this was not mostly used. So let's move on to the features that were actually used during animation creation and that we think animator can benefit a lot from. And the main thing here was the center of mass. That's actually why the program, why the program was started, why it was created. So with the center of mass, we have a special controller that is tracking the center of mass always. So you can see where the position of the center of mass is located in any pose. And you can do different stuff with it. You can lock it, for example, move some parts of the body, and then the other parts will move to compensate. Or for example, and this is already a footage of the modern program. For example, you can look at the projection of the center of mass it's released to do, and see if this projection is between the feet or on the feet, between the fulcrum points of the character. Then that means that the character will be able to keep his balance in this pose. And if not, well, then that means the character will have to fall. So it's not a pose that can be kept static. But the real benefits of the center of mass is when you create the animation, non-current posing. And here the main idea, the main rule that we actually found out that makes every animation better is that the center of mass must have a very smooth trajectory. Even if some parts of the body move fast, the center of mass always has to move smoothly. Well, unless there's like a bomb blowing up just beside the character. If it's the movement that is generated by the character's body, then the center of mass has to move smoothly. And then in midair, when there are no fulcrum points, the center of mass will move along a ballistic trajectory, and it doesn't matter however the character tries to, for example, if the character performs a kick or if he does something else with his body, still the center of mass will move always along the ballistic curve. And the next thing that is harder to understand, but it's as essential as the center of mass actually, is the angular momentum. The angular momentum is actually a vector value. So first, we visualized it as a vector, but that was not very intuitive, and nobody could understand it. Only those who have an applied math background, I guess. So pretty fast, we came up with a visualization that you can see here as an arrow on a circle. And what this actually means, what this visualization means, is that the radius of the circle, the diameter of the circle, represents the moment of inertia. And so the more compact the pose is, the smaller is the diameter, and the more open, the larger. And the length of the arrow represents the angular momentum, its magnitude actually. And so with the same value of the angular momentum, if the pose is more compact, the character will rotate faster and the arrow will circle faster around the ring. That's actually, you probably noticed how nice Skater can tighten his pose to rotate faster, and that has like an immediate effect. So he rotates slowly and then he tightens his pose, rotates very fast. That's what this tool helps to visualize, this kind of behavior. And then during animation, the angular momentum also, just as the center of mass has to move smoothly, the angular momentum, which is something like an energy value, it also has to change smoothly. It cannot rotate fast, and the magnitude of the angular momentum has to change smoothly. So here, for example, you can see that we had to change the animation. If the character just stopped after the swing of the sword, the angular momentum would just disappear. So there had to be some way to reduce this. For example, here the animation was made in such a way that the character actually stepped forward to damp the sword's rotation. And then in the free flight, when there are no fulcrum points and the character is in midair, there's just a simple rule that the angular momentum has to be preserved. So the physical laws state that you can't change it. And with this, we have created vector, mainly with these instruments. We had a bit more, but I'll tell about that later. Vector, which was a parkour runner, and where all this physics was really essential, and it actually, the expertise we had with it was actually, with physics, was even used in the game. So for example, during the animation switching, we smoothened the trajectory of the center of mass, and with the same tools, the animations of the Shadow Fight 2 were created, which was a fighting. It had asymmetric camera, you can see the vector and the Shadow Fight 2, which is actually pretty cool, but we wanted to show our animations in 3D. So in the next project, Shadow Fight 3, we decided to go fully 3D. And that actually meant that we were using a standard game engine, and we're switching to perspective camera, and we needed standard animation as an output, as skeleton model. And so this actually meant that we have to extend the functionality Cascadeur, but it also served another purpose we always dreamed about, that we will let other people use Cascadeur, not only inside the studio, but we will make the program open and easy to use for everyone. And so the first thing we had to add is the bones and the mesh. So this is what you import right now in the Cascadeur. We don't have skin yet. And so you import a skin mesh with the bones. And then on top of that, you create our physical model, which also evolved. You remember the old model consisted of particle points, and right now the model consists of rigid bodies, which actually makes the recreation easier, because you can connect the rigid bodies in any way you want, which wasn't possible with the particle points. You had to put mass into every connection. Now you could connect anything you want, how you want. And then on top of that, we have our control rig, which is essentially a set of controllers used to control the bones and the rigid bodies in a convenient way. And here, with physics, you can already, basically for free, you get an IK skeleton, where you can select any point, move it. You can pin down some points. You can see the red squares. Those are pinners for the points. Then you can select it downside the hierarchy. You can actually change the pivotal rotation to any point and rotate around it. And then we have some standard stuff like direction controllers, all vectors. And you can see if you move in the center of hierarchy, the neighboring parts are affected. That's because of the physics. So actually, during posing, it is already a unique experience. But let's move on. We also evolved, our physics tools also evolved. From the start, we had a simple tool that worked like this. You have some animation, and then and you have your center of mass, and actually the positions of the center of mass are calculated in every frame. So you can select some interval, and from the positions of the center of mass and from the length of the selected interval, this is already enough for the tool to calculate the ballistic which the center of mass should follow. And so then you just press the button, and the center of mass moves along this ballistic. But surprisingly, our animators didn't use it as much. So instead, what they did is they threw a node by running physical simulation, and they got a ballistic with this node, and then they just moved the character in such a way, or just copy paste it, so that the center of mass will be placed in the positions of this node. And there were some pros in that, and we analyzed and understood them. And one is that this is actually a new way. So sometimes they used the previous tool, but sometimes they did this. And that's because this is a new way. You can set the speed at the starting frames and see how the ballistic goes. And because it doesn't affect the character, you can play with it much easier, much faster, iterate with it, and find the wanted height of the jump. And one more thing is that you actually have this saved. So if you change the animation of the character, you still have the ballistic saved, and you can always adjust the character in such a way that it will move along this ballistic. So I thought, well, why don't we just make their life easier? We can use that. So we ended up adding a tool, which we call the ballistic tool. Pretty obvious. And with this tool, you actually create this ballistic curve, and it's created just like in the first tool based on the first and last frame and the length of the time between them. And then you can, with a set of controllers, change everything you want in this ballistic. You can change the starting speed, you can change the landing point, you can change the height, you can see what time it will take with this concrete height. And then when everything is how you want it to be, you just snap the center of mass position to the ballistic in each frame. And our animators really loved the ballistic tool, so we thought, well, how can we move forward? How can we do something of the same kind for the rotation? And the rotation is overall more complicated. So if you look at a platform diver, if the pose is not symmetrical, it results in some really weird spins. And that's actually due to precession, when the angular momentum is not aligned with the main axis of the inertia tensor. But let's not dive deep into the math. Better move on to the tool that actually helps you solve this. And that's how this tool works. We'll just in a moment see how we can achieve such results. So this is our animation, and it looks very realistic. So how did we do that? Well, actually, this is how the tool works. If you imagine that your character is in outer space without any starting speed or any starting rotation, you will actually notice that however he moves, center of mass will hold still. So you, like, if you've watched some space movies, then you know that to move in the space, you have to throw something away. Without it, you won't be able to move. And that actually means that your center of mass will stay at a constant place. But because of how you move, your overall rotation will change. So this is how the overall rotation of the character will change from the animation of the platform diver. So actually see that the ending position is not the same as the starting one. And let's take a more obvious example. If the character is rotating his hands backward, the character will rotate forward. And that's due to the angular momentum being constant. And our tool calculate this rotation that comes from the poses, and all the other rotation comes from angular momentum. And the angular momentum is something that we usually can change quite a bit. And that's actually what our tool does. So it basically calculates such angular momentum that will, for example, in this case, fit in such a way that when you forward simulate with this angular momentum, your character will land with his foot on the pole, not his stomach on the pole. And the animation will be completely physically correct. So it will look realistic, and you will get the results you actually want. And it's pretty much the same, but more complicated with the fulcrum points, because when you work with fulcrum points, the fulcrum point itself, it actually connects the trajectory of the center of mass and the rotation of the character. So during free flight, they are basically independent, and during the moments when you have fulcrum points, they're connected. But the tool mostly works the same, so it finds such an angular momentum, such speed, and then it actually changes the trajectory of the center of mass and tries to find a solution that will make you happy as a user. And so with all of this, we created the Shadowfight 3 animations. You can see that there are a lot of different animations. There are a lot of different weapon types. And there's actually 3 main classes of the animations. It's the strong guys, the agile guys, and the precise guys, how we call them. And the game was pretty popular, rather popular. It had more than 270 million installs across all platforms, and we did a lot of animations for it, more than 800 animations. And one thing we understood during creation of the physics tools is that not everything, not all the tools will work as we want if we use only heuristics. So we started researching deep networks, neural networks, and that's the new direction of our experimenting. And for now, the results are quite promising. So we made a tool. At first, what we did is made a tool that positioned the whole character based on only 6 main points, and we fed all those animations we had from the game to the tool, and the results were really nice. It was already a usable tool, and right now it evolved even further, so we added more usability to it. But you can see how the positions, how the character parts are just adjusting based on the 6 points and resulting in a really nice poses. And what we hope to do in the future is that, well, right now our physics tools, they all work in such a way that the animator actually creates the animation, and then we calculate some starting conditions that that are good for this animation, and that will lead to a balanced result if the character changes his poses this way. But in reality, what people do is they do it a bit differently. So they try, for example, they jump, and then they actually change the initial moves they have. So they know the basic moves, but they change them a little to compensate for any inaccuracies, inaccuracy that appeared when they actually made the jump. And so then that actually means that you have to change the poses based on how the physics works with you. And we could do that. Theoretically, we could do that even with heuristics, but then the animations will be really messed up. The poses will be really messed up. And with deep neural networks, we hope to find a way to change the poses, keep them nice, keep them very close to what animator did, but make the animation realistic and find a solution that will, with just basically forward simulation, result in something very close to the original animation. Okay, so that's basically it. Thank you for watching. Visit our website or write us an email and subscribe for our closed beta test. We're running a closed beta test right now, but we're pretty close to the open beta test stage when we will just let everybody download the program. Yeah, and if there are any questions, I'll be happy to answer them.
Yes, I definitely have a lot of questions. Well, thank you, Alex, for kind of walking us through that. I think privately I talked to you about your company and what you guys are doing. This is a gigantic leap. I think the last time the animation industry have been shaken was the mocap workflow, right? And that was decades ago. The animators, I think, if you can kind of paint a world for anybody that is kind of working outside of that discipline, on how long has it really been for animators really changing a different way of things and having new tool set to play with? It's, to me, at least from coming from the environment or the art side, it's been a while, hasn't it?
Yeah, sure. So actually, it's when I got into all of this, from that time, basically nothing changed. So it's more than all the programs that are used in the animation creation, they're really old. They're like 30 years old, like older than me, at least 20 years old, or something like that. So yeah, the motion capture did evolve a lot, and I think it will evolve further. But as I said, you can't do everything with it. So what we think is that with the involvement of the tools, we hope ours, but even if not ours, we think that this physics-based tool approach will evolve anyway, and at some point of time, creating animation will be way, way simpler than it is right now. Right now, there's just a lot of routine in the work, and routine is, of course, something that can be automated. But what is pretty strange, if we talk about animation, and pretty strange it was to me when I got into all this, is that it's like in computer graphics, for example, using science, using physics, using equations is just, it's very popular. And the tools are very complicated, and the rendering is very complicated. And there are a lot of tools actually that serve artists. So physics-based rendering doesn't mean nobody does the textures, but it means that it's easier to do them. And something of the same kind will happen in animation, and we'll try to provide the tools needed for it. We actually feel that we're the start. So although we came a long path, and the program is actually ready for usage, but there is just a lot of stuff and a lot of ways in which we will make it more convenient. And until the release, I think that it will definitely change a lot. And we're moving on to something that will be really easy to use. So right now, our physics tools, they have some amount of routine. Yes, they let you reach something that was really hard to reach. Actually, there was something that was pretty close, and you probably heard of it too. I don't know if you did. Endorphin.
Yeah, they used that in the GTA 4 or 3? 4, right? That's where I first heard of it. And then I remember briefly that the before LucasArts kind of shut its door, it had like an Indiana Jones kind of demo with it as well, where it kind of was like a simulation. It was like a car hitting a character or something.
Yeah, they actually had two things. One you're talking about, it's Euphoria, if I'm correct.
Right.
And that is the simulation, real-time simulation. And Endorphin was actually a tool in which you create animations that you export and then use in the game or somewhere else. But it utilized the way of creating an animation with forward simulation. So you change the poses, and then you have to. So it's basically close to what we did at the start. You change the poses, and then you forward simulate, and with this poses you see the result you get, and then you can edit them and get the result you want, and then you can blend into the handmade animation. But working this way is actually really hard, and it takes too much freedom away from you. So what we hope to do is leave all the freedom the animator wants to have and just give him the tools to make it look nicer. So yeah, that was a... So we hope to overcome and progress in what they, well, I don't know, didn't finish. Yeah.
What are the some of the challenges that you guys are facing now? Because I think with every new tool, especially in the aging workflow like the animation discipline, there's a lot of old guards that are so used to my graph editors and my lines that they're not like, oh, I got to learn something new. What other challenges besides that have you guys been encountering with not just game development, but like all the other industries that are seeing this as an obstacle?
Well, actually, the game development was the best for now, the best industry we faced, because movies are, yeah, they are much more robust and conservative, and animators too. And so, yeah, what you told is exactly the main thing we faced. It's like we met some companies and they're very happy and they want to use it and test it. So yeah, some of the companies we met that just outright ask, when will we make a plugin for Maya? And we're like, well, we'll see, but for now we don't plan it. So sorry. And or something like, so how do we connect this program with Maya, which is the heart of our development? But you can connect it, of course. You can import and export FBX in the Cascadeur, and actually we did even use it in collaboration with Maya. And we use it in collaboration with motion capture, because what you can do is basically you create, you motion capture something, and then you put it inside Cascadeur, and then you change the animation, but keep it physically correct. Because if you just change it, it will be too different. But sorry, I got off topic. So the challenges. Well, one of the challenges are crunches. So people are in a constant crunch, and they're like, oh, we'll try to use it, we'll test it, but like the next 3 months we have a crunch, and once the crunch is finished, we'll try your program out. And that happens a lot. And seeing this, I think that sometimes the community of the beginners is actually more friendly. And for now, there are a lot of people who are beginners in animation on our forum, on our Discord channel, and yeah, they create a lot of movement, a lot of commotion. They're testing it a lot, so it's pretty cool and it's pretty neat. Well, then the graph editor, for example, we really do not have a graph editor. We do have very good working trajectories, etc., but we don't have a graph editor. So what can we do? So what can we do here? Well, basically, our solution for now is that, yeah, we'll have to add all that stuff that people are used to. We'll have to add it, and that's what we are working right now, and what we're working towards is a way to make these tools and add these tools easily. So we'll add the graph editor. We're working on adding the node editor and allowing to customize the rig all the way you want, etc. But But for the other part, I wouldn't say that there are as many business challenges, but maybe we still haven't faced them because we're like in the closed beta stage. We're not taking any money. Everybody's friendly. Everything's nice. We get invited to different conferences, and all that stuff is really good.
Actually leads into my question that the audience is asking. So is there like a maybe you guys haven't figured out the pricing for this yet, but currently it's in beta. Is there going to be an indie dev friendly tier? How are you guys rolling out a tool like this? And I'm sure you guys are, if you guys are too early, you don't have to say it, but that is a question that's being asked.
Well, it's not like I can 100% guarantee, but actually, first of all, I think that pretty soon we'll announce some pricings and some limitations. And the idea we have right now is to be as indie friendly as possible, as we do have some like inner funding because it's a project of Banzai Games. So we do have the financial support of the company, of the game company. We don't need to like make money and be profitable as fast as possible. So we're not worried to get like some fast money. We think that in the long term, the indie-friendly approach is the best way. So what we are thinking about now is a free version for all indie developers. It will be either a team limitation or an income limitation. Well, that is quite standard, I think. It will be just a free version for all these people, or at least a very reasonably priced indie version, but probably a free one. And then, of course, the paid support, some pro versions or some extended support versions.
Well, Alex, one of the things I actually want to segue into too, this is kind of actually touching on a subject that we just talked about. But yesterday, when Jonathan Holmes came on, he was like a representative from Quixel, but he was coming on as himself. But the world of photogrammetry. So when I hear and see what you guys are doing with animation, I kind of see some correlation between the two, where the resistance at first is always, at least as you kind of talked about during development, right? There's not a lot of time for professionals to kind of put time aside to discover new tools and to better their workflows, even though they should. But the killing cycle of 8 hours a day dedicated to the work, it really takes a lot of the times. I feel like the younger talent that are eager to kind of go home and discover these things and bring it back to the office, to have this kind of grassroots movement where they like kind of change the office mentality of maybe we shouldn't animate with Maya as much as before. You know, that's pretty much that type of conversation. Do you feel, in your experience, that like I wonder what your perspective is on that with older developers not getting in with the new stuff?
Well, sure, there are different older developers, and some are very friendly, some like new stuff, but yeah, there are a lot of people who first don't like anything that is not like what they're used to. There's just a lot of people like that. And for them, well, probably we should make more options for them to switch into some setting that will be really close to what they're used to. And second, there are a lot of questions if you have like that, which is a like complete list of what they use in Maya. So Yeah, that's definitely the case, especially for animation and especially in movies. In game development, the the average age I think is lower in game development, and maybe the companies are richer and they don't have as strict timelines, and they're more open to new technologies. So we had a lot of interest from the gaming industry, not from other industries, and we were really happy about that. And then there were people who are just animating as a hobby, and actually we did a how do you call it? Well, we questioned our audience what what other animation program they use, and actually among the people who signed up for our closed beta test and answered these questions, there were more Blender users. They were almost the same number, but there were actually more Blender users than Maya users. So what we think from here, this is that, well, it was like 40% of people were professional in animation, I think, and the other were mostly people who are novice, and those people probably use Blender. I think it partially is connected to the fact that Maya is actually really pricey. If you just want to, even if you want to use it for a hobby, it's still you need to buy it and it costs a lot. So people are switching to free software like Blender. Yeah. So basically, these people who are not who are just doing animation as a hobby, and part of those people are just young guys, students who are doing this as a hobby, and then they will become professionals. So a part of our plan is that we concentrate on those guys, and then with time they will grow. They will be more skillful. They will go to work, and that is part of a way we can get into the market. But we also hope to improve the program so much that it will be just obviously good.
Yeah, and I kind of sign off with you on that because until Cdux.me is sponsored by Autodesk, I'm going to say Autodesk is showing its wrinkles, at least from the 3D art side as well. And I am seeing this trend towards Blender because for a long time, they've been the king of the playground. They've been the preferred program. And at this point, I think a lot of studios are still using Autodesk tools. But because of the lack of the updates, and the lack of competition, they've gone really stale. I can't imagine, I can't think of the last 5 years, a major feature that I've used within Maya or Max that I felt like was decidedly the best thing out of all the 3D software. If anything, what I've been seeing over the wall has been Modo or all these 3D software programs or Blender even having these really cool features that I wish I had. And so I think in time, if anything, the same with what you guys are doing with CASCADEUR, is that there is a movement that is happening among game developers right now, especially if you're in the programs working with 3D, that not just animation, but 3D and all the other disciplines that are using Maya or Max are kind of just looking to change and make their workflow better. I think it's all happening kind of right now is what I am seeing. Talking to you, talking to Jonathan yesterday, talking to people who are using Blender. It seems like everybody is kind of, well, metaphorically meeting in the middle here and saying, yeah, we need to change what we've been doing for the last 10 years because it's been kind of boring and it's been kind of slow. Like nothing nothing exciting is happening in this space.
Yeah, I totally agree. Yeah, competition is always good. Actually, it's always nice to have competition. So, and one more thing is that concentrating on the realistic animation, I think it's really something that a lot of people would like to see. That I personally would like to see. I really loved dinosaur teams from the time I was a kid, and yeah, the Jurassic Park is great, but it's not as believable, and it's not as filled with action as I would like it to be. So creating this virtual worlds with fantastic creatures is definitely something I personally dream of, and I think with Cascadeur we're moving towards like action scenes that you want, and including the realistic action scenes of different characters, or for example humans with super abilities. I don't know, a Spider-Man that is actually physically realistic. That would be awesome.
I definitely agree with you there. There is, at least in the animation world, to me as an outsider that just likes things being animated, it feels like the stylistic way of doing things, where like the Pixars or these kind of like 3D rendering, not 3D rendering, what do you call it? What is that industry called? Animation industry, but it's kind of 3D animation industry that are... Yeah, kind of cartoon, but you know what I'm talking about. DreamWorks, Pixar. Yeah. They are definitely hold Han King as the prophet, but at the same time, I totally see CASCADEUR. I always mispronounce. Sorry. Helping with that department to kind of help move that, so it's not completely like frame by frame hand animation. But also the mocap world, right? Isn't perfect yet. It's getting there, but there still needs to be a lot of cleanup that an animator would have to do, and becomes a lot more technical than creative. And so there is that middle ground where, you know, you're not really getting a guy in a mocap suit to do Spider-Man moves that I feel your program and your company is a good choice to fill. And it's great, man. Though I think anybody that sees a demo from you guys instantly get it. So it's just like that slow trolling movement among older developers to kind of just move aside, and yet the young developers kind of take over. A changing of guard always takes time with new programs. I've seen. I don't know any new software that takes the industry by storm. Even Blender was 5-10 years in the making. I remember, and I tease with every speaker that's been on here, like I was making fun of it 4 years ago, and now I'm asking for tips from these. Jonathan put it best yesterday. These vegans that love talking about Blender all the time. I'm going back to them and asking them for tips of how to use this. So it's always funny how it works, but it seems to be the case every 3 to 5 years. So we are at the hour of the presentation here, and I want to thank you again, Alex, for joining, not just today but yesterday on the roundtable. But if you don't mind, maybe you can throw back your closing slide so that people can be reminded of where to find you, how to download the program, and what to look forward to. Are there major dates that your company is aiming for? I know you have this looming announcement. What can people expect in the coming months with that?
Yes, we're hoping in the start of the next year to launch our open beta test. We will launch the new versions of closed beta test before that, with some improvements, etc. But on the stage of the open beta test. Anybody who wants can just download the program. We also plan right now in our license agreement, it's stated that you can use it, but if you want to use it for commercial purposes, you have to contact us additionally, and we think we'll move on with that too. So you can basically use it for commercial purposes at the time you downloaded it. And then this open beta version, it will include a lot of inside work, a lot of refactoring that will allow us in the future to move much faster. We're actually right now the stuff is hard coded a lot. The rig is not as dynamic, and it can be changed as dynamically as we would like it to be changed. So with this new updates, we'll move on to not editor, which kind of looks like a classical stuff, but we'll add some elements to it that are not classical, some new elements. And then we'll also change the graphic user interface a lot, and fully move to the new engine, add dark theme, which is right now lacking, and now we understand that it's something you have to do in a professional software. And there will be a lot of other improvements. So stay tuned, and we'll try to make you happy, give you the best animation software.
Awesome. Well, thank you, Alex, for coming on and being part of GDUX Day 3 and closing us out. And we are looking forward to talking to you some more. Yeah.
Yeah, I'll be happy. I'll be always happy to see you. And thank you.
Perfect.
Okay.
All right, Alex. Thank you again, and I'll catch you next time for sure.